As we move deeper into the first weeks of 2026, something important is happening quietly across the country. It's not making daily headlines, and it's not being talked about much outside of legal circles, but it has the power to completely change how millions of Americans buy, own, store, and carry firearms. These changes are not theoretical. They are not proposals or rumors or possible future laws. They are active statutes, finalized regulations, and court-approved systems that are either already in effect or scheduled to activate very soon. And the most dangerous part is this: a lot of law-abiding gun owners have no idea they exist yet. Picture this for a moment. You've followed the rules your whole life. You passed background checks. You stored your firearms responsibly. You bought equipment legally, the same way you always have. Then one day, without any malicious intent, without trying to skirt the law, you unknowingly cross a legal line that didn't even exist a year earlier. Not because you did something reckless, but because the law shifted while you weren't looking. That is exactly what is happening right now in several states, and the window to prepare is closing faster than most people realize. Let's start with a state that has been at the center of legal battles for years, where one single ballot measure quietly rewrote the rules of firearm ownership almost overnight. In the Pacific Northwest, voters narrowly approved the sweeping firearms initiative back in the fall of 2022. For a long time, it sat in limbo, stalled by lawsuits, injunctions, and uncertainty. Many people assumed it would either be struck down or endlessly delayed. That assumption turned out to be wrong. In early 2025, the state's appellate court issued a ruling that changed everything. The court concluded that the measure did not violate the state constitution, clearing the final obstacle that had kept it frozen in place. Once that decision was handed down, the countdown officially began. The state set a firm activation date in mid-March of 2026, giving residents only a short window to adapt to an entirely new system. What does this new system look like in practice? For the first time in the state's history, residents must obtain official permission from law enforcement before purchasing any firearm. This isn't a simple form you fill out at the counter. It's a permit issued by local authorities, and getting it involves several steps. You must complete a state-approved firearms safety course. You must submit fingerprints and a photograph. You must pass a background check that goes beyond the standard instant check used at gun stores, and you must pay a fee that, depending on local implementation, can approach $70. That permit does not last forever. It expires after a set number of years, and renewing it requires additional fees. Without that permit in hand, no firearm purchase is allowed, not from a store, not from a private individual, not from a family friend. Every single transfer must pass through a licensed dealer, and every buyer must show proof of that permit before a transaction can legally occur. For people who are used to private sales, this is a fundamental shift. The casual exchange that once happened between neighbors or friends now requires paperwork, scheduling, and official oversight. And if the permit system becomes overwhelmed, which many officials have already warned is likely, delays could stretch into weeks or months. There is also a new limit on ammunition feeding devices. Any magazine capable of holding more than 10 rounds is now restricted. Owners who already possess them can keep what they have, but acquiring new ones is no longer allowed. Selling them or transferring them to someone else becomes illegal after the law takes effect. Violating this provision is not a minor infraction. It carries criminal penalties that can follow someone for life. What's particularly alarming is how close the deadline is. State lawmakers themselves acknowledge that infrastructure was not ready. Training providers are limited. Law enforcement agencies are understaffed. And yet, the system is moving forward anyway. Anyone living there who plans to buy a firearm in the future needs to be acting now, not later, because once the switch flips, there's no grace period. Shift your attention now to the Rocky Mountains, where another state has adopted one of the most complex and restrictive firearm purchase frameworks in the country. In the spring of 2025, the governor signed a bill that redefined how semi-automatic firearms are regulated. This law does not ban ownership outright for existing firearms, but it builds a maze of prerequisites around future purchases that many people are not prepared for. Under this law, most semi-automatic firearms that use detachable magazines fall under special regulation. This includes popular rifles and a wide range of pistols. After the effective date in mid-2026, purchasing one of these firearms is no longer as simple as passing a background check. Instead, Buyers must prove they have completed specific training courses. Within a limited time window, these courses are not inexpensive. Some are classroom-based. Others involve live-fire exercises. Many are spread over multiple days. The cost can quickly climb into the hundreds of dollars. And before you can even sign up for these courses, you must obtain an eligibility card issued by your local sheriff. That process requires fingerprinting, a background investigation, and additional fees, all before you even step foot in a gun store. Even more confusing is how the law draws distinctions between different operating systems. Certain recoil-operated handguns remain exempt, while others using different mechanisms are restricted. To the average person, the difference is meaningless. To the law, it's everything. That means the pistols that look nearly identical serve the same purpose and fire the same ammunition. Grandfather provision be treated entirely differently and before the cutoff date remain legal to possess. Some limited family transfers are allowed, but purchasing anything new after the deadline requires foresight and planning. Miss the window, and the barriers become much higher. The law also introduces a state-level prohibition on devices that increase the rate of fire of semi-automatic firearms. While federal courts have struck down certain agency interpretations in recent years, this state has chosen to implement its own definition, and that definition is broad enough that many owners are unsure whether common aftermarket components can fall under its scope. Now travels south and west to a state that has spent decades building one of the most intricate firearm regulatory systems in the nation. At the start of 2026, a new law took effect that dramatically alters how firearm parts can be purchased. Online sales of key components are now heavily restricted. Sellers must verify age and identity before shipping anything, considered a critical part. For many retailers outside the state, the compliance burden is simply too high, and they have chosen to stop shipping there entirely. The definition of unfinished components has also expanded. Items that were once sold legally as raw materials are now classified as regulated firearm parts. Selling them without serialization, documentation, and oversight can lead to criminal charges. For hobbyists, builders, and home gunsmiths, the legal landscape has become far more hazardous. Another statute enacted at the same time imposes strict storage requirements. Firearms must be secured whenever they are not under the owner's immediate control. Failure to do so carries serious consequences, especially if another person gains access. The time frame for reporting lost or stolen firearms has also been shortened, leaving owners with less room for error. Later in the year, yet another law is scheduled to activate, one that effectively removes many popular handgun models from the market by mandating manufacturing technologies that are widely regarded as unreliable. Manufacturers have already signaled that compliance is not feasible, meaning availability will shrink even further. Move east to the Midwest, where a different state has tightened its storage laws. As well, new rules require firearms to be locked in a manner that prevents access by anyone other than the owner. The penalties for non-compliance increase dramatically if a minor is involved. Reporting requirements for stolen firearms have also been shortened, increasing the risk of accidental violations. On the East Coast, lawmakers in a politically divided state are advancing legislation that would mirror some of the most restrictive policies seen elsewhere. These proposals target specific categories of firearms and magazines based on manufacturing dates, creating a patchwork of legality that would be difficult for even experienced owners to navigate. Whether these bills pass remains uncertain, but the fact that they are moving at all signals the direction of the debate. Amid all of this, there is one unexpected development at the federal level. A long-standing fee associated with certain regulated firearms has been eliminated, while the approval process itself remains unchanged. Removing that financial barrier significantly reduces the cost of compliance for law-abiding owners. It does not apply to every category, but for many, it represents a rare instance of regulatory relief. When you step back and look at the broader picture, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. More layers, more prerequisites, more deadlines, more penalties for mistakes. The pace of change is accelerating, and the margin for error is shrinking. Consider how easily someone could stumble into a problem. A resident waits too long to buy a hunting rifle and discovers they now need a permit. That takes months to obtain. A firearm owner assumes their previous training still counts, only to learn it expired by a matter of months. A parts order gets canceled because a seller won't ship anymore. A lost firearm isn't reported quickly enough because the deadline changed quietly. These are not extreme scenarios. They are ordinary situations that are already happening to ordinary people. Staying informed is no longer optional. It is the difference between compliance and violation, between access and denial, between peace of mind and legal trouble. The laws will continue to evolve. Court challenges will continue. Some rules may be overturned, others expanded. But the one constant is change itself, and the people most affected will always be those who assume yesterday's rules still apply. Today, the landscape has shifted. The clock is ticking, and knowing what's coming is now just as important as knowing how to safely handle a firearm.